Hello, everyone, and welcome to Profiles in Risk. I'm your host, Nick Lamparelli. On this hot and muggy New England morning, I am pleased to introduce Steve Shoap. Steve is a retired engineer, and maybe you're wondering why we're having a retired engineer on a show that's dealing with risk and insurance. Well, I bumped into Steve on Twitter because of an invention he did. So in this particular episode, if you're listening to this on the audio, you might want to jump over to YouTube and watch the video of this because we're going to get to see Steve's invention. But I would like to welcome Steve Shoap to the show. Steve, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Nick.
It's a hot day. We are going to be getting into wildfire season, and you and I bumped into each other on Twitter probably 3 or 4 months ago because of an invention that you created. Before we jump into that, can you give us a little bit of your background?
Well, I'm a retired electrical engineer. I've been doing that for a long time. I'm a nerd. You guys are insurance nerds. I'm an electronics nerd. I mean, when I was 13 years old, I built my own transistor radio when transistors were new. Not that anybody. So I go way back. And when I retired, I found that I needed to do some nerdy things.
Okay, so let's jump into that. Your particular invention solves a gigantic problem. Last year, we had probably the worst wildfire season in California, maybe in the United States, in recorded history, potentially, definitely by losses. And so what I saw on Twitter was an invention that you did to solve wildfire. Could you walk us through your retired engineer? Why or how did you end up wanting to solve this problem?
Right. Thank you. So I've been doing this probably about 8 years. And years ago, these big fires started, and we saw these newsreels of firefighters sort of scraping the ground and making fire breaks. And then you have the planes dropping the retardants on the ground. And I kept seeing that over and over again. And I was wondering, just why isn't there more use of water on the ground? And I started thinking about it. And then fortunately, I live in the Boston area, and the National Fire Protection Association, the NFPA, is in this area. So I went there and found that they had a library that's open to the public. And I went in there and I spent time just looking at books and reading. And the librarian at some point said, why don't you talk to one of our committee people here? And I ended up volunteering for 2 years on a technical committee, hanging out with fire people. And I had to stop because I was volunteering, meaning I was paying for my own flights to different places for the meetings. I was paying for my own hotels. And for a retired guy, you have to say, well, I mean, 2 years was good, but it really got me into it because they probably have the best library in the country on wildfires. And I learned a lot because I'm a nerdy guy, and that's what I enjoyed doing. And I read all about it, talked to different fire people. And then I had an idea. And you'll see this coming up in the slides later, but basically it was the question of why can't you get more water to a fire? And that's what I started researching and answering. And the problem with this was it was too high a technology. It used digital networking with little wires and hoses and stuff like that, because I was for quite a while a sort of digital networking kind of engineer. And we all are used to Wi-Fi and Ethernet and things like that. But when you talk to firefighters about Ethernet in firefighting systems and hoses, they think, wow, you're Captain Moonbeam kind of a thing. So I then realized that what's this thing called minimum viable product, that you have to come up with something simpler. So I started thinking about how to protect the home from wildfires and came up with something that I now have a US patent on and a Canadian patent. And well, the reason I'm having this talk is the chicken and the egg problem. of I have to generate enough interest in the public and among the fire people that I can get funding, or what I would really like to do is license my patents to some big companies who will build and sell these systems. That's where it is.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. The minimum viable product approach, I think you went about it the right way. I don't know, initially it just seemed like an Ethernet solution to this might be over engineering, but you came up with a very clever way of potentially solving that problem. And this is going to be a first for Profiles and Risk. You're actually going to show us some slides and a demo of the solution. So I would say, why don't we jump right in? Why don't you share your screen and start walking us through the slides? Okay.
So as Nick said, I mean, there are staggering, well, these firefighters in terms for insurance companies are very, very expensive. When they lose 200 homes, that's a lot of money.
And people.
And people, yes.
Let's not forget, firefighters are risking their lives to protect this property. So there's a dual benefit there.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the overall picture of what I have. Now, here's a home, and there's this blue thing going around. There's a hose. The hose is getting water from a swimming pool. Now, you don't have to have this big a house. You know, it could be a smaller house. By the way, I used Google SketchUp, which is pretty convenient because you can download houses and things like that people have already constructed. So I do all my slides myself. What was very difficult, this is water here, but it's not, it's very hard to.
It does look like a fence.
It looks like a fence, but it's supposed to be water. And this was hard enough to do, let alone the fact that I wanted it to be maybe angled a little bit or something. But this is a fire that's, coming towards the house. And a lot of fires are actually low burning things, but they're very wide. They're not, I mean, if you live among gigantic trees, you're in trouble. There's not much that anybody can do, but most people don't. But a lot of times the fires just, could be a mile wide, you sometimes see in the TV. That also bothered me. You had these very, very wide fires, but they weren't particularly aggressive, but they just were wide, and you couldn't get enough fire engines and hoses and everything to cover the entire thing. You might do a little area of it, and then it would get past you. And then it becomes dangerous for the firefighters if you're getting sort of, surrounded by the fire, and then maybe there's no way out, kind of a thing.
They're essentially getting outflanked.
Yes. So we'll see that there's this. That was at one time something I was pushing for a solution. So here's the pool with water. Here's a pump, then a hose, and then this hose goes around the house, and a good spray goes up. And my idea here is you turn on the spray hose system and you leave. There's no need to stand there and fight the fire. The firemen are safer if a home gets protected like this. And sometimes homeowners stay behind and say, we're standing there with their garden hose in their hand, and they say, I'm going to fight this fire. That's a really bad idea, because when you see some of the television videos of what remains after the fire has gone through, you see cars that are melted. Melted. I mean, we're talking thousands of degrees sometimes, and you don't want to be standing there with a garden hose. So now, what is already out there in terms of what you can buy today? It's always sprinklers, lawn sprinkler kind of things. So here's a lawn sprinkler that you can buy that you might put on a piece of wood that's stuck in the ground that are a couple feet high. Here's one where they actually sell you this little stand you stick in the ground. And then here's one that fits on top of a roof. So here's all this, and I'm going to expand this. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lawn sprinkler kind of things. There's some of these things that stick in the ground with on higher. These are other ones that stay lower, or maybe they go on here, or those, I don't know, maybe where the rooftop is. Then you have all these little hoses to connect. You have these little couplers that hook everything up. it's pretty busy. And I called the guy at Wildfire and said, how much I figured when I look at this, it covers about 100 feet. They wanted $3,000 for all of this. My system is just hose. I mean, you have to supply in both cases your own pump and your own water supply.
Can I ask a question, Steve?
Yes, sure.
So this particular system that you're showing us here, are they expecting that this would get set up before the fire comes, or is this like a permanent setup?
No, this is before the fire comes. A lot of times you have people that say, gee, I only had about 15 minutes of warning to get out of here, which is pretty pathetic. So, you couldn't set that system up in half. It would probably take you an hour or 2 hours. So I don't know. The answer is this takes a long time to set up.
Plus, you don't want the homeowner climbing on the roof.
No.
To have to set this up. Okay.
So on the other hand, if you leave this out all the time, there's risk of, I don't know, when somebody comes to cut your grass, I mean, they're going to cut the hoses. So these are not extremely popular systems to begin with. And with $3,000, and mine not only is going to be much less money because of you're going to see how simple the materials are. Mine's also quicker to set up and get it out there. It'd probably take you 15 minutes instead of a couple of hours with the other one. So that's what's there today. Now, here's a picture of my backyard. Now, I'm a person that doesn't like grass, so I love the home that I'm in because it's all trees and nothing much grows back there. This is back over here in my garage is the pump that you're going to see and the big swimming pool that I put in the yard. And this is 200 feet of my hose system that goes around here. And these things here are sprinklers that you're going to see in the video. And they put out a lot of water. And then you'll also see later that you can get reels on wheels that you can wheel the thing out pretty quickly. So now here's the hose that you put around for the 200 feet and the hole. Every 10 feet, I put a spray hole. Now, the whole nozzle, there's no moving parts, and all we have is hose pieces on top of hose. So
what's the diameter of the hose, Steve?
Right now, this was actually big. That's a good question, Nick. I started out with 3-inch hose, then I got it down to 2.5, and then just recently I tried 1.5, which is actually quite small, and I thought this is a joke. It's not going to work. It works great. So we're talking about a 1.5-inch hose, which is not a lot of hose. It's not heavy. It's easy to carry around, and so I'm very pleased that we can get the cost of the system down with the narrow hose. But that's a good question there. So now this piece here down the bottom is going to go on top of that hole. So it's going to be, these two are going to be centered here. So what happens is the water comes out of here. Here we have 2 pieces of hose that I've cut out, the same kind of hose. There's one piece that is on top here, and I cut a square in it. And then I glue another piece underneath it, which makes a little chamber. And then there's 2 holes in here that the water goes out of. So it comes out of here into the chamber and goes out. When the water is in there, I think what happens is it oscillates like crazy, and you'll see it coming out in a fantastic way. I don't understand how it works. I discovered this by playing around and just using sheer try this, play around with that, I'll tell you why it was fun for me, because I spent an enormous number of years in electronics. And for me, electronics is, I've done it. And, but to get into something completely different, pumps and hoses and, working in my basement, playing around and in my backyard, I mean, I'm really enjoying it. And I'm in the long run, I think I'm going to do some good. So it's I'm really having a good time with it. So I think I said enough about that. Now, this is the closer up view where I've glued this onto here, and it really stays on. I found an excellent glue for the polyurethane. I forget which it is. I guess that's really silly that I can't remember. But anyway, that's what it looks like. Now, what you're going to see is a video of this thing spraying, and I have this information at the video, but I'll talk it through. I have 20 nozzles that you saw in the backyard there. They were 10 feet apart. So that means there's 200 feet of hose. And the total flow, because it's 15 gallons per minute per hole, per nozzle, it's 300 gallons a minute, and it's at 70 pounds per square inch. So it's not a particularly high pressure. You can get a reasonable pump for that. Now, the water spray, I'm pretty sure, I haven't done this on a live fire yet, but I have two places that I'm going to be dealing with that are actually going to try real fires with it and make videos. And then I think I'll have a better sort of sales opportunity to show, because everybody always say, did you really try it on fire? When you see the amount of water, I think you'll believe that it can do some good. Most houses, they say, get ignited from the neighboring home that's on fire by embers, which are just the little pieces of stuff that are blowing over that are on fire. So this wall of water that I'm putting up, I'm sure is going to stop embers. And the spray also insulates the home from radiant heat, which is, very, very hot, something burning near your house, and then it gets so hot that something spontaneously combusts. So now we're going to move on to the video. So
this is at 70 pounds per square inch.
Yes. And this is it's starting up, and now it's getting into the full. It's almost at 20 feet high, and I actually recently was able to get a little higher. So this is a lot of water that's coming out. And we'll stop it.
Don't worry, I can edit a lot of this.
Okay, so now this is a pretty beefy fire pump in my garage that was donated to me by the director of engineering at Hale Pumps. And he also co-authored a paper with me about a system I will show you later. So there's some credibility that, if somebody gave me something this expensive for free, that maybe I have a good idea. Plus he wrote a paper with me, so I feel good about that. I mean, you can't be doing this for years without some kind of positive reinforcement. Okay, in my swimming pool, in my garage, I figure there was about 700 gallons of water in here because I was spraying quite a bit of water in my backyard there. My wife showed me how much our water bill went up those months.
So, Steve, how long would would 700 gallons last? In the setup that you have, and it's 20 plus feet in the air, how long would 700 gallons last?
Probably a couple of minutes. And here's the whole thing. You just have to engineer everything. We have to get some more experience on how much water we'll want to have with a real fire, and how much water you can afford to, in other words, you just have to say, how big is the house? By the way, I'm working with a company, and I encourage you to, if you go on my website, which you'll see, I also have a Twitter account, which and I'm partnering with a small company in Spain where they're all PhDs in forestry and wildfire fighting. And by the way, everybody in Spain is pretty much volunteers. So these guys are firefighters. They really fight real fires. And one of them's getting his PhD and all that. So he'll be able to tell me exactly, if you tell him the kind of tree that you have near your house, he can tell you how much water you're going to need. So I have that kind of support. And they're building their own system and selling a system based on sprinklers. So I don't go around saying that sprinklers are no good, because they have a product to sell, but they're going to supplement their thing. There's also a company in Canada called Wildfire that is selling a sprinkler-based system, and their consultant is a retired firefighter, and he's really, really excited about my system. So I'm optimistic. I mean, I've sent him some hose samples of it, but right now he's fighting the enormous number of fires in Canada that are going on. They have hundreds and hundreds of fires up in Canada, right in the West Coast, up there right now, because of the droughts and heat and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, but I'm busy with a lot of different people doing things. So I can't answer you exactly, is 700 gallons enough, but I know people who can tell you that. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, so now this is my US patent, and on my website, you can actually click on a link and it takes you to Google Patents and you can see the whole patent. And I also have a Canadian patent. So I've pretty much got all of North America, and I'm looking for opportunity for people who are interested in licensing the idea. I would like to help them build it and, move it along, not just take the money and run. I mean, I'm in this because I'm interested in it.
Yeah. What strikes me as interesting about your particular product is its simplicity. You can whip it out, so to speak,
Yeah.
in a very short period of time. So if you get an evacuation order, you can pretty much set this up pretty quickly. As you said, there's probably some things that need to be ironed out, but in reality, with Wildfire, I think it has to be a very simple solution. I don't think it probably can't rely too much on complicated electronics or anything like that, because there's too many things that could probably go wrong. So one of the things I think could be interesting for our audience, anyone that's listening that may want to contact Steve, is the simplicity of it. That I think that's what makes it probably incredibly valuable and useful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. So now, my original idea was, question was, why can't you pump farther? And the answer is you can. Firefighters know how to do this. If you consider these to be fire trucks, which is what they use today. So if you put a fire truck here and a fire truck there, a pumper, you can go with a good size hose about a mile. And then but because of friction, by the time you get through the hose, you've lost pressure. So now you have to boost up the pressure again with another pump and pump it along. And you can do that theoretically indefinitely. Now, in reality, this is rarely used because you have to have very close coordination with everybody doing the pumping over radios, because if somebody gets out of sequence and turns off their pump instead of when everybody else has turned it on, you get a thing called water hammer. And something we're not used to thinking about is that when you have this much water moving along, it's like a sort of a steel rod, because water is incompressible. So think of this heavy object. It's all this water is moving along at a good clip, and all of a sudden something stops it. Well, I mean, it's just kind of blow up this pump. And so in your house, sometimes you turn off the faucets and you hear this rattling going on. That's called water hammer. But so basically, this is rarely ever used because you can't coordinate 4 people over a radio channel and get them to turn on and off. So if you had, and now we're moving to, this is why I started inventing things. And in the future, this is all very possible. I really believe that, even though it seems like things could go wrong, there's no fire here. We're just moving water from somewhere, maybe a couple of miles away or 10 miles away, to a place where there's not enough water, but that's where the fire is. So that's a big problem, is just moving enough water from one place to another. So we're going to move on. Then I found out that there was a company, I'm using their hoses right now, not this hose. On my website, you might find it interesting. This hose was used to pump in Iraq and Afghanistan and places. They were pumping water and diesel fuel, because that's the 2 things that these sites, at sort of advanced locations for the Army, they need water and they need diesel fuel to supply the energy, electricity, and everything like that. So this hose had a wire embedded in it so that there wouldn't be static electricity, because they're worried that the diesel fuel might ignite. So when I found out this existed, it gave me the ability to talk to the guy and say, he says, yeah, they could put 2 wires in it pretty easily. So if you had 2 wires, you could have a digital network. And I also have Canadian and US patents for digital networks, which is this advanced thing. But who knows, in 5 years, we might decide that it's worth doing because the firefighters are getting even worse. So what I then came up with is the idea that not only could you protect a house, but you could protect an entire neighborhood with a very, very long hose, and actually these are two hoses side by side. So what happens is you pump, water to here, and ultimately you're pumping water and let's say fill up this entire hose. Now, if you see a fire coming, chances are it's going to be coming in one direction more than another. This is the beginning of the fire. So what I have is the ability by remote control with the digital network to turn on a valve that sprays over this segment and nowhere else. And I actually have built, it's on my website. You can see I was this digital networks engineer, and I prototyped all the electronics and that kind of stuff. So I know it's doable. And I actually went to, somewhere in, I forget where at the moment, in New Hampshire, and we hooked it to a fire hydrant. And I actually had two sections of hose where I remotely had one section turn on and the other one turn on. And so I proved the feasibility of all that. So, that was what I was doing. And this is an example of a reel that you can tow around behind a truck. And this is for some big hose, not even the little hose that I'm talking about for the house. But people do this all the time out on farms and things like that. Then there's another twist to this. Just last night, I saw in the news that somebody set a prescribed fire, which is an intentional fire that they try to burn the brush on the ground so that if a real fire comes along, it won't get a lot of fuel. But I'm saying you could use the same kind of a system to surround an area where you're going to do a prescribed fire, and if it tries to escape, and last night this fire escaped in Florida, and it burned 10 or 20 homes. So they do, and a lot of people talk about preventing big wildfires by doing more prescribed fires, but these things do sometimes escape, and it's not popular when it happens. So this is another possibility for future stuff.
That seems like the perfect use case, Steve, because we want to do prescribed fires.
Yeah.
We want to eliminate the potential fuel so that we don't get the black swan types of wildfires. So they're already doing it. We don't have to burn some homes. We can get the fire started. They want to do it, and this seems like a perfect test case to test a lot of the different factors that you're inventing here.
Yes, thanks. I mean, it's like I say, we live in a world where our houses have Wi-Fi and everything is taken for granted. But when you start talking about a wire, it's just a simple wire in a hose. And, the firefighters, when you talk to them, their eyes roll back, like, oh, yeah, right. So anyway, it's going to take a different set of people thinking about it to make this happen. And the insurance people certainly have a motive for all this, because they're going to be big losers with all these. They are big losers.
They sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I've been very interested in, I've had conversations online and just been extremely interested in trying to combine risk mitigation, risk prevention with insurance. How do we blend the two? Because it's in the insurer's best interest to prevent these fires.
Yes.
So really the big thing is the investment and recouping the cost and, making the economics work. So that's what that was very intriguing to what you were doing is immediate insurance benefit to what it is that you're doing.
Yeah, that's why I'm talking to you guys. So why am I doing this presentation? As I said, I would like to license my patents to companies who would build and sell the systems. Chicken and the egg problem, but I'm working on it. I'm using Twitter very aggressively, and I'm getting reasonable results, I must say. It's very good. Please check out my website. It's fightwildfires.com. Write that down, please.
We will share it. So I assume that the video and some of the other pieces are on your website or on YouTube.
Yeah, on the website. Yeah, just all you need is the website.
Okay.
Everything else. And like I said, share this link with the executives at your insurance companies and anyone else you think might be interested.
Fantastic.
Now, some insurance companies are already doing special things to protect their customers' homes from wildfires. USAA gives discounts to customers who have taken steps recommended by Firewise from the NFPA. I started following Rob Galbraith, who I know you know, He's with USAA, and he followed me back, and we're sort of Twitter friends, and that's how I found out about you, Nick. And he's a great guy. He's always meeting with everybody, and I'm just building this little network through Twitter of friends and people with common interests, and it's great. Chubb Insurance sends firefighting teams and equipment from Wildfire Defense Systems as sort of another company. It's a private firefighter group, and how you become a customer. I think if you have a very expensive home in a high-risk area, then they suggest, it said complimentary even, but I guess it's in their own interests, right?
I think it's part of their Masterpiece program.
Yeah.
If you have a Masterpiece policy, you would qualify for this. And and it is complimentary. I mean, it's in their best interest to prevent $1 million homes from catching on fire.
Right. And I think sometimes they go out and they spray the home down with all this gooey stuff, and then they leave. And at some point, you have to probably wash all that stuff. Well, I don't know, whatever. But the point is, these companies are trying to do something. And they could have teams just go out and set up these systems. As long as people have water supplies, they can bring the pump. They can bring the hoses. And by the way, I forgot to say it earlier. You can set up this thing around your home, you yourself, and then you don't have to turn it on right away. You could turn it on just by your cell phone. You could remote call up and have a little thing turn the pump on when it becomes the appropriate time. Or you could have the fire, people could fly by with a drone and see where the fire is, and then put out a suggestion that says this neighborhood should turn on their sprinklers right now because the fire is close. So, there's it's amazing. You can go to a store, and for $100 or less, you can buy a drone that gives you HD TV images flying over homes. I mean, wow, that's unbelievable.
Amazing. It is.
Yeah. So, people who like technology, there's opportunities of all kinds that nobody's really done much of yet.
Yeah.
And then there are some homes in very high-risk areas where the insurance companies may refuse to sell them fire insurance at all. And maybe this is one way for them to, get protection if they buy a system like this. And
it's a great use case. Absolutely.
Yeah. So my email address is on my website. Please feel free to contact me if you have any comments or questions. And I thank you very much, Nick. I appreciate this.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming on. We will, for anyone that's watching, anyone that's listening, we will put the appropriate links on show notes or YouTube. So if you need to reach Steve and you can't memorize all of this information, no worries. We'll share it all on all of our social media. So Steve, thank you for taking time out of your morning. It's going to be a hot New England weekend, and it's New England, right? We have nice weather, and then you snap a finger, and it's 90 degrees every single day, hot and humid. So we finally hit that. So stay cool. Maybe set up a sprinkler system in your backyard.
Yeah.
To stay cool, and we will share this. And this is a great invention. It's people like you that perform the sacrifices that are required for us to keep advancing what it is that we're trying to do. So this is a fantastic invention, and we at Profiles in Risk and Insurance Nerds will do all we can to share this as well, because it's in everybody's best interest to reduce catastrophic wildfire.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Nick.
Okay. And for anyone that's watching, until next time, thank you.